trout are still here. They haven't been destroyed.
These fish were different because they were all huge.
As soon as we held that brook trout up in the air for them to see, we were surrounded by boats.
It completely revolutionized fly fishing in Maine.
Everybody wants to be that biologist here in the state of Maine.
As the sun awakens the eastern edge of America, a rugged wilderness stirs beneath its first light. Towering pines shelter winding streams and provide refuge for a native species to thrive. What once was a common sight in streams along the entire Appalachian Trail have now found their last stronghold in the pristine waters of Maine. This is the sanctuary of eastern brook trout. Maine is known for many things: lobsters and lighthouses, mountain peaks and rugged coastline, LL Bean and Old Town Canoes. Maine is home to more than 17 million forested acres, 6,000 lakes and ponds, 32,000 miles of rivers and streams, and 3,500 miles of coastline. Maine is wild and rugged, both in its landscape and climate. Mainers are hardy, resourceful, and steeped in heritage, and we cherish our time outside, especially fishing and hunting. Although Maine offers many angling opportunities in freshwater or salt, native brook trout and landlocked salmon are esteemed as heritage fish, tied directly to their importance within Maine's sport fishing roots. As the morning fog rises off the mirrored waters here in the Moosehead Lake region, we are joined by retired Maine game warden Roger Gay and registered Maine guide Blaine Bronson for a morning of fly fishing for native brook trout from canoes on a remote mountain pond.
Hey, Blaine,
Yes?
take notes.
Huh?
Take notes.
Oh, I just missed him. Just missed him. You distracted me, Ryan.
You want a hand with that one?
You want a hand with that? Oh, right behind us. I'm on it. I'm on it. Put me in, coach.
Fly fishing is unique, and that takes a little bit of practice and skill, but it's something anybody can learn and learn pretty easy. Don't think because you've never fly fished before that you're not going to be able to be successful. If you get a good guide or somebody who can teach you how to do it, you're never going to have a more wild wilderness experience. People kind of keep their remote ponds quiet, their favorite ones, and they're hard to find. Not so much to find where they are. There's lists out there that show you where these remote ponds are, but just finding how to get access to them can sometimes be difficult, but it's worth the trouble. Fish on! They're really wild. They're very pretty, very colorful. The red dots and the blue hales and the markings on the back. They're such a pretty fish. And a lot of people just they don't have the opportunity in a lot of this country to catch those. And so you come to Maine to get that opportunity to catch those kind of fish. All right, buddy, thank you. Go.
Maine's remote, pristine wilderness is the last stronghold for the elusive and stunning eastern brook trout. Historically, the brook trout's range once spanned from Georgia to the Canadian Maritimes. Due to habitat loss, climate change, and the introduction of brown trout and rainbow trout, numbers began to decline in the mid-19th century. Today, few places outside the Northeast hold wild populations. Because of this, Maine has long been a bucket list destination for anglers looking to catch their first trophy.
And just got into fishing. I was with my best friend. We were pretty young. We were probably 14, 15 at the time, and we were anchored out there in a little canoe. And I saw this big fish roll. And my buddy was with me, says, I want to fish for it. He got bored of it, put the pole back. As soon as he did, I picked it up, cast it out there. I just kept letting the line out, letting the line out, letting the line out. The current was taking it because we were in such rough current right there by the dam. Just as soon as I started reeling in, I hooked on this brook trout. It turned out to be 17.5 inches long and 3.5 pounds. There was all kinds of other people out there fishing. They were all kind of, what's going on? As soon as we held that brook trout up in the air for them to see, we were surrounded by boats. So that was the end of our fishing that night.
Today's fishing spot was handpicked by the man perhaps most familiar with the remote waters of Moosehead, retired game warden Roger Gay.
There we go.
There we go.
Look at him. Beautiful he is. Oh.
So you were at the warden service for?
My entire career, 25 years, and about 18 years, I think, in this region.
Did you choose this district because you wanted to be here, or did you just happen to be placed here and ended up loving it?
I transferred here because I was very passionate about remote wild trout fishing ponds. You know, I grew up fishing with my dad and you know, a family that owned boarding camps and stuff, and it was, you know, A, their livelihood, but B, it was something to protect and preserve for the next generation. When I fish with my grandkids and they catch a fish, then I know it was all worth it, you know? It's just pass it on down, and it's important. It's very important. And the beauty of it is the trout are still here. They haven't been destroyed, and that's what makes me feel like I did my job and I did it well.
You know, it was a few years ago, but I think I read that Maine has over 90% of the native brook trout populations for the United States.
Yeah.
That's incredible in and of itself, and kind of is a testament to the great work that the state has done in stewarding the resource. And also, I think the angling community and Mainers love and appreciate the fisheries so much that there's a lot of citizen support too.
That's what I felt my whole career, and that, you know, the true sportsmen, you know, they want this to be a legacy that they can pass down, and they see the importance of that. So, you know, that when you have that kind of support, it's very satisfying all the way around.
Oh, I'm on.
All right.
I'm on.
There you go.
Feels like it's got a backbone too.
Yeah, it does.
All right. Hey, we're on the board.
All right.
It's a nice one.
Oh yeah, that is a good one.
So what's your stance on catch and release versus catch and keep? What's your personal ethic on whether people should keep trout?
I have no problem with people keeping, you know, fish for food at all. Our limits are set for that purpose, so that's not an issue. Certain bodies of water that when you catch these, you know, giant fish, is too beautiful to only be caught once.
Yeah.
But, you know, hey, if you catch a nice fish and you want to take it home and have it for supper, there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the Maine tradition, you know. And they're tasty. Kind of like them.
So as Mainers, we're all pretty protective of our state and the resource, and typically, you know, it's even hard for me to share it with out-of-staters.
Mm-hmm.
How important is it for the rest of the country to understand the special thing that we have? Or should we keep it a secret?
Well, we can't. We can't, because everybody has the right to learn and see this for what it really is. Where you run into problems, when we saw it early on, when ATVs first started really being used and there was virtually no regulations, you know, people were getting into areas and just leaving trash everywhere and really destroying some of these remote pond fisheries that took years to come back. So it is important, and we want them, but we want them to come with the level of respect that we have, because we cherish it.
There's something about the excitement that both myself and my kids have when we catch trout together.
Exactly.
And we can go catch bass and have a great time.
Yeah, but it's not the same.
It's in their blood to love brook trout.
It just is. It's its own passion, you know. Sitting in a canoe in a place like this and just enjoying the beauty of it all and catching a few fish. What could be better than that?
I haven't found it yet, Roger.
It's hard to beat.
This was new to us. We knew that trout spawn in the springs and trout ponds and stuff, but these fish were different because they were all huge.
The state of Maine has amazing resources, so everybody wants to be that biologist here in the state of Maine.
About 8 years ago, I had a phone call from somebody, and they said, you know, we've got some big fish right out in front here, and I think they're trout. So I sent my team up to look, and sure enough, there was a group there of about 30 brook trout, and they ranged from 4 to 7 or 8 pounds, all spawning right in the lake. This was new to us. We knew that trout spawn in springs and trout ponds and stuff, but these fish were different because they were all huge. Went back up to the spot a couple years later and took some radio tags.
There's a transmitter that's a little tag that's implanted surgically into the body of the fish, and each tag has a unique frequency. And so we know when we tag that fish that that frequency goes to this fish. And so we have a receiver, there's portable receivers, there's stationary receivers. We can track by boat, by plane, by foot, by canoe. Stationary receiver set up in one location and the fish has to pass by it. And they'll be scanning through all these codes and frequencies. And when it hits that frequency, it'll emit a beep. And we can look and say, all right, this is a brook trout we tagged on this date, that was this long, in this location.
And we followed these fish around, and they went all around, they moved all around the lake, but they all came back to the spawning area. I was there one day when I could see an otter coming across the cove, and the fish just scattered. And what we learned was they can get away from the otter when they've got 75,000 acres to swim out into. Whereas if you're in a section of the stream that's 75 feet across, you got a harder chance to escape. So these big older fish, that's probably why they were living to be 6 or 8 years old, because they just survived a lot better. Within a year or two later, people had found them and they were just harvesting them one right after another. So we did some research up there, we located the spawning areas, and we ended up closing off several thousand acres of Moosehead Lake to protect these very unique trophy fish. You would expect maybe some of the anglers would be upset when you're closing off an area to trophy fish. The anglers were 100% behind us. Everybody wanted to see these fish protected. That we had something really unique in Moosehead. We want to protect it as much as we can. We've been back to that spot in Lily Bay a number of times, and those fish are still there. There are probably a couple hundred of them. I feel really good about that. We've really made a difference there.
The Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife plays a pivotal role in conserving native eastern brook trout in Maine. These fish hold a place of importance in Maine's sport fishing heritage, and the agency is at the forefront of efforts to protect and restore the habitat of these iconic fish, ensuring that they thrive well into the future.
You know, there's something to be said about being a fisheries biologist in Maine or a wildlife biologist in Maine, because the state of Maine has really amazing resources. So everybody wants to be that biologist here in the state of Maine, right? If you're a brook trout biologist, a bear biologist, who wouldn't want to be in Maine, right? This is the place to be.
A large part of biologist efforts is expanding access to these fish through a robust stocking program.
Stocking is a technique, a strategy, a tool that fisheries biologists have used for 100 years. And we use it primarily to provide fishing opportunity. So for example, in this area down in Augusta, there aren't any wild fish, so we have to stock down here. It actually takes the pressure off the wild fish. If people down here can catch trout, they may not be traveling all the time up to the wild ponds to fish. So it provides more opportunity for people around the state.
Stocking programs are really good for anglers when it's for a put and take fishery. My name is Megan Hess. I'm a registered Maine guide and a commercial fly tyer. When you have these areas where you know that typically trout can't overwinter or they can't spawn themselves, putting these fish in there for recreational anglers or for younger kids to go catch them and eat them, that's a fantastic thing.
So fishing pressure is not really as important in a lot of places as it used to be, but now our challenge is invasive fish.
I've seen it. Bass were introduced illegally, and That affected an entire chain of water almost to the Canadian border. And that entire watershed is now bass water, which used to be salmon and trout.
They both occupy the same habitat. And, a trout will lay a few hundred eggs, maybe 1,000 eggs. Bass will lay thousands or tens of thousands of eggs. And so they just get outnumbered over time. And I can't think of any place in my region or really around the state where you have an extensive bass fishery and a wild trout fishery. They just don't coexist together.
Though the cohabitation with smallmouth bass has had an impact on the trout population, it's also created another highly desired fishery, further diversifying the angling experiences that Maine has to offer.
Maine's a really special place because it has a lot of different fishing opportunities. So you can be one day down at the coast fishing for striper and travel a couple hours north and start fishing for smallmouth bass in rivers, travel another hour north of that and be fishing for brook trout and landlocked salmon. So that has a lot of different opportunities for fishing. Here, if you say gray ghost, everyone's like, yeah, I've got 5 in my box, because it completely revolutionized fly fishing in Maine. That creativity and that artistic talent of just sitting down and making something out of nothing and having it work so well, there's something very Maine about that. I started fly tying in college, and I was doing it a lot because I thought I was going to save money on the flies that I was losing. Well, that is false. But I continued to do it because of the meditative aspect for it. When I sit down to tie, you're kind of focused in on one thing and you're doing really small movements and you're letting your mind kind of think about only one thing. So I started tying before bed, and I would just tie a couple flies here and there, 1 or 2, and it would wind me down a little bit. So I just continued to do it, and I really like the creative aspect of it too. My whole family paints and draws and all of this, and so it became natural to me to look at some of these materials and say, oh, what can I use this for? How does this match with this? So it was a little bit self-taught, and it was also tons of mentors that taught me. When I first got to Maine, I heard the story of Carrie Stevens, and I was fascinated by it. She was a woman from Western Maine, and her husband was a guide, and she went, when her husband was off guiding one day, she sat down at his vise, and the story goes she didn't really know what she was doing because she had never tied a fly before. So she sat down and grabbed a gray feather and ties it right on top of the hook, which typically is not, at that time, you didn't tie flies that way. You never laid down a fly right on the top like that goes along with the hook shank. And she's tying it, she's doing her thing, oh yeah, looks great, okay, and then goes out to Upper Dam Pool and within a couple casts catches a 6-pound brook trout. And that's how the gray ghost came to be. And I think it's so fascinating because it completely revolutionized the way that, like here, if you say gray ghost, everyone's like, yeah, I've got 5 in my box, you know. I think it's just such an interesting story how that creativity and that artistic talent of just sitting down and just making something out of nothing and having it work so well, there's something very Maine about that.
On the banks of the Penobscot River, that Maine ingenuity and craftsmanship takes shape every day at the Old Town Watercraft Production Facility. The factory operates at an impressive scale, making tens of thousands of boats each year. At the heart of this operation is a workforce with deep-rooted experience. Many of the employees have spent a significant part of their lives perfecting this craft, with some families spanning multiple generations, underscoring the brand's commitment to tradition and excellence. The production process starts with powdered resin, a versatile material that forms the foundation of our kayaks. This resin is precisely weighed and poured into the molds based on the color palette and the desired final pattern. These molds are then placed into large ovens where they rotate as the plastic melts, creating their trademark swirls. Once out of the oven, the hulls are wheeled over to cooling racks, at which point the excess plastic is trimmed, sharp edges are rounded over, and the skid plates are attached. The hulls then move over to dedicated production lanes for various finishing tasks. Skilled workers handle the attachment of hardware and rigging, such as handles, bungees, straps, and rudders. The boats undergo meticulous quality checks. Each hull is carefully inspected in water tanks where any imperfections or issues are identified and addressed, ensuring that every boat meets Old Town's stringent standards. With these finishing touches and a thorough inspection, the watercraft are either wrapped and loaded into trucks for delivery or placed on racks for inventory, patiently awaiting their next adventure. Old Town's boats can be found anywhere, from car tops on the coast or chained to trees by remote trout ponds. Old Town is known for reliability. It's not uncommon to find these boats handed down from generation to generation, which is why you'll find them on the shores of virtually every waterfront cabin in every corner of the state. But Old Town's iconic status in Maine isn't just about crafting exceptional watercraft. It's about weaving threads of adventure and memories into the fabric of Maine's identity. Our boats have witnessed countless sunrises and sunsets and become an enduring symbol of Maine's deep and abiding love of the outdoors. The preservation of Maine's vast landscapes resonate deeply with the sportsmen and women who cherish them. Whether you're casting your line into a tranquil pond or pedaling through a winding river, Maine remains the quintessential destination for those who seek both the thrill of the catch and the serenity of the wild. For a closer look behind the scenes of this series, plus in-depth tips and tricks from our pro staff, visit oldtownwatercraft.com.